Hey, what the hell? Hey, it's Nick Digilio. How you doing? Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. Please do. New daily videos with movie reviews and stories and stuff. Hey, my podcast, it's getting closer. So close. I can almost smell it. The first episode of the Nick D podcast will debut on Tuesday. This coming Tuesday, the 18th of January, on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Check out radiomisfits.com. And also, you can subscribe to it and get it any place where you can get your podcasts. All the major places you can get it, it will be available. And very excited. I can look to my left. My dining room table is right over there, and it now has gear, mixer, microphone, headphones, laptop, soundboard. I'm going to be doing a podcast starting on Tuesday. It will be launching. And also, help me out on Patreon, for God's sake. Patreon is a great place to see content and movies and videos and all kinds of cool stuff. Patreon.com/NickD Show. Patreon.com/NickD Show. Whatever you can do to help me out, $3, $6, $25 a month. It all helps me to create more videos for you and some exclusive content. With the real story of what happened at WGN. If you want to know that, become a patron. So there you go. All right, Scream, the new Scream movie, which I like to refer to as it should be referred to as Scream 5. Don't know why it's called Scream. Stupid. But anyway, I will be seeing it in a matter of hours, so I will review it coming up right here. Tomorrow or the day after, it'll be posted. But I figured that this would be a nice time to talk about Wes Craven. This will be the first Scream movie. There have been 4 already. This will be the first one to not be directed by Wes Craven, obviously because Wes Craven passed away. It's going to be interesting to see how this film plays without the sensibility and the style and, just the intelligence of Wes Craven as director. So Wes Craven is was a phenomenal genre director. One of the best horror directors, one of the most intelligent. He made some shitty movies. He made some great movies. He was kind of all over the map sometimes, but when he made good movies, he made really, really good movies. And movies that weren't just simple horror movies, but they were about something. He made movies about society and culture. His movies were intellectual. I mean, the guy was a genius. He was a professor, and he was amazing. He passed away in August of 2015. He had brain cancer. He was sick for a while. He died at 76 years old. And it was a sad, sad time when he passed away. We were all very upset about it. And he's left behind, in the horror genre. He is a master. He's considered one of the masters of the horror genre. And he's a guy who, when he made great movies, catapulted the genre of horror to a level that was beyond intelligent. He created some of the most memorable and iconic horror movies and villains. I mean, Freddy Krueger was invented by Wes Craven. So he was amazing, and I thought it would be nice to take a look at Wes Craven and rank his movies and talk about his career and talk about his movies on this weekend of the release of the new Scream film. The new Scream film, I'm looking forward to it. I like all 4 of the Scream movies. I really do. It's very rare that a film series has 4 entries and they're all good. The 4th one is good, not great. The other 3 are really good. The first 2 are magnificent. The first 2 Scream movies are fucking amazing. The 3rd one's really, really good. 4th one's good too, just not as good as the first 3. But it's very rare that 4 movies in a series are all fucking solid and good. And that has everything to do with Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, obviously, who wrote the original script and came up with the ideas for it. I'm looking forward to this new one. They're bringing back Courtney Cox and Neve Campbell and David Arquette from the original series, and then a whole bunch of new actors. One of the actresses who plays one of the daughters on Better Things is in it. So that's enough for me. But it's directed by the directors who did Ready or Not, which was a terrific, crazy sort of thriller from a couple of years ago about a woman who marries into a new family and they like to fucking hunt her down. And the directors also did a segment for VHS, the anthology movies. And I think that they do great stuff. I really loved Ready or Not. And this movie, the trailer looks great, and the buzz is pretty solid for the new Scream movie, so I'm looking forward to it. But let's talk about Wes Craven. Wes Craven busted into the scene, exploded into the scene in the early 70s with Last House on the Left. Last House on the Left, notorious movie. Notorious revenge movie that set up a whole genre. It was made for little to no money, with amateur actors, like Texas Chainsaw, the Tobe Hooper movie. It benefits from its low budget, from its amateurish style, with the acting and everything, which made it even more sort of hardcore. It was a movie that, the whole it's only a movie thing, that started with Last House on the Left because the movie was so terrifying. Whoever came up with that advertisement, it's so terrifying, just keep saying to yourself, it's only a movie, it's only a movie, it's only a movie. That started with Last House on the Left. Some people hate it. I don't know. It's a hard movie to watch. It's one of those movies that I admire. I've not seen it. I've seen it, more than, I don't know. I've seen it more than 10, 12 times, but not nearly as much as I've seen like Texas Chainsaw, because it's a very unpleasant movie. Last House on the Left is a very unpleasant movie to watch. But it's a horror classic, and it's a remake, of Virgin Spring. Roger Ebert considered it one of the best movies of the 70s. And again, way more intellectual and way more brilliant than people give it credit for. So, he makes his first mark with a classic with that. Follows it up with The Hills Have Eyes, another legendary classic movie about a family going on a camping trip in the middle of the desert in Winnebago, and they're basically terrorized by these crazy hill people. And it's an insane movie, but it's a great one. I saw that at the Luna, at Belmont and Cicero, the Luna Theater in Chicago. Belmont and Cicero, saw it with my dad, and still considered a classic to this day. Hills Have Eyes. Deadly Blessing was a film that he made. Not a very good one, about religious cults. It had some really good ideas in it. There's a classic scene where they hold a woman's mouth open and drop a spider into a tarantula into her mouth. That's sort of the key sequence in the movie that everybody goes back to. It's not a great movie. I admire what Craven was trying to do with religion and with cults and things like that. There's some intelligent moments in it, some good, interesting stuff in it. It's not great, but it's it was okay. I mean, the first three out of the gate classics already. Deadly Blessing, people love that movie. Hills Have Eyes, Last House on the Left. And then you've got the Swamp Thing, which not a great movie. Adrienne Barbeau, based on the comic book. I'm sure if it was, I'm sure it's been remade. They've made TV series out of it before. It has moments. Adrienne Barbeau is very fun to watch in it, and great makeup effects. And it was kind of a different kind of a film for Craven to make. It was, if I remember correctly, it was PG. It was rated PG, which based upon the first three movies that Craven made, you wouldn't expect a PG movie to come from the guy. He made a lot of. By the way, he did make made-for-TV movies as well. I did a few of those. Hills Have Eyes 2. I don't know what to say about Hills Have Eyes 2. It's bad. It's real bad. I think the most memorable thing about Hills Have Eyes 2 is that he gives a dog a flashback. That's the thing that I remember the most about it. I've only seen Hills Have Eyes 2 in its entirety once. I've seen scenes from it and bits and pieces of it. Tried to watch it on cable a few times. It's just not good, especially considering how great the original Hills Have Eyes is. And I actually like the remake, Hills Have Eyes. But anyway, I just remember that a dog has a flashback. That's the thing that I most remember from the movie. The dog has a flashback. He followed Hills Have Eyes 2 with A Nightmare on Elm Street. What can you say about A Nightmare on Elm Street? Launched a franchise. An iconic horror villain that goes down in history as one of the best horror characters, one of the most memorable movie characters, not just horror, but one of the most memorable movie characters ever, and handed a career to Robert Englund. Robert Englund was a B movie sort of character actor, worked a lot. Robert Englund, if you look before he became Freddy, he was in a ton of movies. He worked a lot of TV. He was a he was a guy who worked. He worked a lot, and but then that was it. His career, boom, he became Freddy, and he's been Freddy ever since. He's been riding that train, for almost 40 years now. But the first Nightmare on Elm Street, classic, really scary, much different than the other Nightmare movies because the first movie, he's not Freddy Krueger, he's Fred Krueger. He doesn't really have a lot of, he's not like killing teenagers and then having a wacky catchphrase or some sort of weird retort like, welcome to prime time, bitch, and all that nonsense. It was a real horror movie. It was a really fucking scary movie, and it's still really scary. There are moments in that movie that I've seen Nightmare on Elm Street a million times, and there are still moments in that movie that fucking freak me out. That scene where Heather Langenkamp falls asleep, in class, and then sees the dead body, Amanda Wiss's dead body in the body bag, and she's like in the body bag, and she goes out into the hallway and looks down in the body bag. There's a trail of blood leading to the dead body, Amanda Wiss in the body bag, and her legs lift up, and she gets dragged down the hallway in the body bag. That shit's scary. And Fred Krueger is fucking scary. He's not wacky Freddy Krueger. He's not wisecracking, hey, everybody loves Freddy. Fuck that. The real Freddy Krueger was a scary motherfucker, and he was scary. And Nightmare on Elm Street is a classic, a terrifying movie. And all the sequels, some of them were fun. I'm not a big, Nightmare guy. I like Nightmare 4 a lot, the Rennie Harlan one. But most of them, he came up with the idea for the third one because the second one, everybody considers the second one shitty. But he came up with Wes Craven, he didn't direct it, but he came up with the idea for the third one, bringing back Heather Langenkamp, having the Dream Warriors. All that stuff was his idea. And most people either love Dream Warriors the most of all the movies, but certainly it's the best. People think it's the best of the sequels. I don't. I think the fourth one's the best. But years later he would come back to the Nightmare series, and I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. Deadly Friend, terrible movie. Christy Swanson plays a girl who they turn into a robot. It's a really shitty movie. It's a terrible. It's dumb. It seemed like Wes Craven was just coasting because this came on the heels of Nightmare, and he was just kind of coasting on this one. Of course, the only scene that anybody really remembers from that movie, or at least the only scene that I care about, is the basketball scene, the infamous basketball scene where Christy Swanson, is now a robot. She fucking whips a basketball at Anne Ramsey's head, and Anne Ramsey's head explodes. I mean, granted, it's one of the classic scenes in horror history, one of the funniest moments in horror movie history. I mean, whipping a basketball at Anne Ramsey's goddamn head, and Anne Ramsey's head explodes because of the basketball. I've seen that scene. I've watched that scene countless times, and I remember seeing the movie at the Norwich. And during that scene, the whole place was packed. During that scene, the whole place went nuts. So basketball, Anne Ramsey's head exploding, that's the only thing I really care about in Deadly Friend. But now we get into some stuff here. Serpent and the Rainbow. Serpent and the Rainbow might be my favorite Wes Craven movie of all time. It's certainly up there. It's certainly way up near the top. Serpent and the Rainbow, Bill Pullman plays a guy who goes down to uncover what's happening in Haiti, in the world of voodoo. The dead have been coming back to life, and he goes to investigate what's happening down there and gets caught up in it. It's a fucking scary movie. It is also a very political movie about what was happening in that region at that time in the late 80s. It is a really political movie with a lot of allegory, and there's a long terrifying sequence where Bill Pullman is like buried alive, but he can't move. His vitals have stopped for all intents and purposes. They think he's dead, but he can still feel, and he's still conscious. And there's this long sequence where he's buried alive and he wakes up in the coffin. They put a tarantula on him. One of the most terrifying scenes ever in movie history. And I have a phobia, claustrophobic thing about like laying on my back and being held down. And I remember the first time I saw Serpent and the Rainbow was at the press screening, and I was sitting next to Roy Leonard, and I started hyperventilating during that scene, and Roy was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Hey, I'll be all right. I'll be okay." He's like, "Maybe you should step outside." And I'm like, No, this is fucking awesome. It's awesome. I was hyperventilating, completely freaking out, sweating, like a maniac. And that still happens to me. I curl up in the fetal position during that scene whenever I watch that movie. Serpent and the Rainbow, brilliant movie, brilliant politically, and scary as hell. Serpent and the Rainbow, way up there on the Wes Craven scale of great movies. Shocker was fun. Shocker came out the year after, about a criminal who gets electrocuted and his body jumps into other people. And it came out around the same time as The Horror Show and The Hidden. And all of those movies were about like an entity or a spirit jumping in to bodies and taking them over, so that the seemingly innocent person suddenly becomes a maniac killer because they're possessed by this spirit. And The Horror Show and The Hidden and Shocker all came out within months of each other. And they're all good. They're all worth seeing, especially The Hidden. The Hidden's a fucking great movie. I've never seen The Hidden with Michael Nouri and Kyle MacLachlan, about aliens that jump into people's bodies. Fucking great movie. Shocker's fun. It was a throwaway. It came after a really, intelligent political movie, Serpent and the Rainbow, and he just had some fun after that. The movie after that, 1991, was People Under the Stairs. Phenomenal movie. One of my favorite Wes Craven movies. You want to talk about political. You want to talk about a movie that is brave, that casts a young inner-city black kid as its lead. This movie was released in 1991, late in 1991. Came out right before the Rodney King thing happened. And it was about race. It was about culture. It was about class and being rich and being poor. It is an incredibly potent political allegory, where these people are being kept in the basement by these two hicks, and played by two people who were on Twin Peaks at the time. They were these zombies, and these people that are kept down in this basement are fed news video to watch 24 hours a day. At that time, the Gulf War had just happened, and they were the first Gulf War. The first Gulf War with George H.W. Bush. And they are forced to watch 24-hour footage of the Gulf War. It's scary, it's kinky, it's funny as fuck, but it's a really important movie. It's one of the smartest and most one of the really smartest and most intellectual horror movies ever made. It's really about more than just, and it's got all that stuff in it. It's got kinky thrills, it's got gore, it's got wacky characters, it's got laughs, it's got scares, it's got everything that you would want on its surface to be just a really cool, well-made horror movie. But it's a lot more than that. It's a film about class and race. It's a fucking brilliant movie if you've not seen it. People Under the Stairs. New Nightmare. I have to touch on New Nightmare. New Nightmare was when Wes Craven came back to the Nightmare franchise after it had been diluted into just Freddy, wisecracking and, it just like figuring out different weird ways to kill teenagers and have Freddy be he became a stand-up comedian. So Wes Craven came back and I think made the first meta movie. It because that's what Scream is, but it preceded Scream by a few years. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I think, is a fucking great movie. It's second only to the original Nightmare as the scariest. In it, he's in it. He plays Wes Craven. Heather Langenkamp plays. All the actors from the original Nightmare on Elm Street play themselves and their characters. Robert Englund plays Robert Englund, and he also plays Freddy. And it is this movie about making movies. It was the first movie to be in the joke. It was the first movie to really be meta, and to talk about, to talk about what it was like, to make movies and to comment on the movie that you're in. It's a horror movie that comments on horror movies. New Nightmare was the first one to do that. It did it before Scream, and it did it in a much more terrifying way, in a much scarier way. I think New Nightmare is great. I think it's brilliant. And again, meta before meta was meta. You want to go back and watch it. And that's a thing now. Go watch that stupid fucking Spider-Man movie. That's all that is. It's 2 hours of meta nonsense. But New Nightmare was the first one to do it, and it beat Scream to the punch. It beat Scream to the punch. And one of the reasons why I think Wes Craven did Scream, one of the reasons why he did do Scream, was because Kevin Williamson, who wrote it, was like, hey, I saw New Nightmare, that kind of commentary about the horror genre within the horror genre is what I want to do. So New Nightmare. Then he did Vampire in Brooklyn, which was obviously a money-paying gig. Not very good. Eddie Murphy, vampire comedy. He clearly did it for the paycheck, and he got paid a lot of money for it. And then the next movie he did was Scream. And the original Scream, what can you say about the original Scream? He had pretty much covered that territory in New Nightmare, and I think did it better. I think New Nightmare is better than Scream. But Scream is obviously a horror classic. It's a phenomenal movie. I'll never forget the first time I saw it, 1996. I had just gotten married, and my new wife and I saw it together, and she fucking freaked out during it. It was a packed theater. Everybody screamed. Everybody laughed. It's a perfect horror movie and a great commentary about horror movies. Everything that we love about Scream, the commentary of the horror genre within the horror genre, and it working as a really scary movie, and having an opening sequence that is just fucking legendary, killing off Drew Barrymore in the first 10 minutes. Everything about the original Scream is perfect. It came out at the perfect time. It was at the perfect time in terms of how they advertised it with the young people, the way the poster was designed, the way Miramax was, really advertising and making films for young people. The blueprint for all of that was Scream. Scream 2, everybody, they did it a year late, came out a year later, so they thought they rushed into it. It's every bit as good as the first one. Some people even think it's better. It's a fucking brilliant follow-up and another commentary about the horror genre, but this one was about sequels. The first one was just about horror movies in general, and the cliches that come with that, but this was about sequels, and they topped it in every way. Scream 2 is amazing. Music of the Heart, he did a Meryl Streep music drama. Meryl Streep got nominated for an Academy Award. Somebody in a Wes Craven movie actually got an Oscar nomination. Again, an unusual movie for him, but a solid movie, a really nice movie. It's not like he's incapable of doing that. The man was an intellectual, soft-spoken man. I mean, you ever interviewed, you'd see his movies, you'd think the guy was a raving lunatic, but he was soft-spoken, intellectual, thoughtful, and very, very kind. He had, his persona and his image, the way he really was completely different than the kind of movies he made. So, a lot of people were like, how the fuck can Wes Craven make a movie like Music from the Heart? Well, because he's brilliant, he's a professor, he's knowledgeable. Scream 3 came after that. Big fan. I still like it. Some people not as big a fan of it. And then after that was Cursed, which is a terrible movie, werewolf movie. If I remember correctly, I've only seen it once, with Christina Ricci. And a really bad movie. It was another one of this is one of those that fell into that category of the package, the Miramax horror movie package. They really didn't write a script. It was like, okay, let's get Wes Craven. We've got a supernatural element to it. Let's get Christina Ricci and a few other, attractive young people. Put them in the movie, and it'll sell. And it wasn't good. And you could tell that Wes Craven's heart was not in it. Red Eye was his next movie. Fucking great movie with Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy. A beautiful, streamlined, 87-minute thriller. Not a wasted moment in it. About a maniac who's on a plane, sitting next to Rachel McAdams, and how she has to deal with this lunatic, hijacked maniac killer on the plane. Fucking great. Just a streamlined, beautiful. It was just like Wes Craven's like, look, I could do. It's not a horror movie. There are no real horror elements. It's just it's a suspense thriller that is just bang, bang, bang. A to B to C to D. Boom. Beautifully structured. Beautifully directed. It was like a machine. It was a suspense machine. If you've not seen Red Eye, and on top of that, great performances. Cillian Murphy, phenomenal as the villain. Rachel McAdams, outstanding in it. I love that movie. And then My Soul to Take. The less we speak about that movie, the better it is. It falls into the category of Cursed, more of a package. And Wes Craven was putting his name on a lot of stuff too, like Wes Craven Presents, and a lot of those movies weren't very good. But then his last film was Scream 4. And I like Scream 4. It's not as good as Scream 3. Definitely not as good as the first two, which are magnificent. But it's solid. It's scary. It provided the thrills. It provided the laughs. it was satisfying, like, to find out who the killers were and to see more of the horror commentary and the comedy that was in the movie. And that was his last movie that came out in 2011. So, and he died in 2015. He's made some extraordinary movies. The T-shirt that I'm wearing, Serpent in the Rainbow, obviously the first Nightmare on Elm Street, the new Nightmare. Hills Have Eyes. He was an incredible horror director, and his contributions to the horror genre are kind of unmatched. The man created Freddy Krueger. So we miss him, obviously. And I hope that Scream, the new Scream, Scream 5 or Scream, whatever the fuck you want to call it, I hope it's good. I think it looks good. We all love the characters. 3 of the great main characters are coming back. And I hear it's clever. I hear that they follow, the structure of the other 4 movies, making it a horror movie about horror movies within a horror movie. And the meta thing is really big now. So people are used to it. When the first Scream movie came out, and especially when the first New Nightmare came out, it was unusual. I mean, like, really, really rare to see a movie like New Nightmare and then a movie like Scream to come out. Now it's a regular thing. So we'll see how it is. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm seeing it in a few hours. And I've got high hopes for it. I like the directors, and I love the idea. And I love Wes Craven. He was a great guy. I'm just upset that I never got to meet him. A lot of these other great filmmakers I had gotten to meet over the years and interview, mostly because of, when I was at WGN, and mostly because of my wonderful relationship with Mike and Mia Kurz at the Flashback Convention as somebody who has been a host and an interviewer and stuff. So I've gotten to meet a lot of them. I never got to meet Wes Craven. Never got to interview him. And I always kind of, I regret that. So, but anyway, Wes Craven rules. Those are his movies. There's a lot of great stuff to choose from. Check out his IMDb page. IMDb, Internet Database page. And check it out. So, Wes Craven rules. I'm looking forward to Scream. Full review of the new Scream movie coming up tomorrow. And there you go. Hey, thanks for watching, and enjoy the veal.